What happens when Sheldon Cooper suddenly realizes that his entire life might be built around one thing he absolutely cannot stand: unfinished business? For most people, an unfinished conversation is just an unfinished conversation. You move on and continue with your day. But for Sheldon Cooper, an unfinished conversation is basically a psychological emergency. And that is exactly where this hilarious story begins. Amy decides to help Sheldon with what she believes is his pathological need for closure. Sheldon immediately rejects the idea because, of course, he does not believe he has a problem. But the moment Amy gives him a simple game of tic-tac-toe, everything changes. Sheldon sees the game as something that must have an ending. Win, lose, or draw. The important thing is that it must be finished. Amy is trying to teach him that not everything in life needs a perfect conclusion. But Sheldon is not exactly the easiest person to reprogram. When Amy suddenly stops the game, Sheldon completely loses his mind. This is what makes the scene so funny. Amy is treating Sheldon like a scientific experiment, while Sheldon is treating a simple game of tic-tac-toe like a major psychological crisis. The real comedy comes from the fact that Sheldon slowly realizes Amy might actually be right. Sheldon has spent his entire life trying to control everything around him. He wants rules, routines, explanations, and most importantly, closure. If something is left unfinished, it stays in his mind. Amy knows exactly how to use that weakness against him. She begins creating small exercises designed to help Sheldon become more comfortable with uncertainty. But naturally, Sheldon does not simply accept the treatment. He argues with the science, questions the method, and insults the entire concept of the experiment. That is classic Sheldon. The man can accept complicated scientific theories, but he cannot accept losing control of a simple conversation. Eventually, something surprising happens. Sheldon begins to make progress. For a brief moment, it looks like Amy has actually succeeded. Sheldon becomes proud of himself. He praises Amy for being an excellent neuroscientist and a wonderful girlfriend. But then he suddenly stops. Amy asks him what comes next. And Sheldon says that it doesn't matter. For Amy, this is a huge moment. Sheldon is finally letting something remain unfinished. But just when you think Sheldon has changed, he reveals that he was only pretending. Amy immediately realizes that he has been playing her the entire time. This is one of the funniest things about Sheldon. Even when he appears to be improving, he somehow finds a way to turn the situation into another experiment. But the story does not stop there. While Sheldon is struggling with his own need for control, Leonard is dealing with a completely different problem. Leonard's mother has written a book about her parenting. Unfortunately for Leonard, the book contains some very embarrassing stories from his childhood. When Leonard discovers that Penny is reading the book for her psychology class, he immediately becomes uncomfortable. He knows that the book contains details about his childhood that he would rather keep private. But Penny quickly discovers that Leonard has been using his sad stories about his mother to get sympathy. And more importantly, that sympathy sometimes leads to romance. Leonard admits that whenever he talks about how terrible his childhood was, Penny becomes extra sympathetic. And Leonard has learned exactly how to use that sympathy. But Penny decides to give him a surprise. She invites Leonard's mother. Suddenly, Leonard's entire plan falls apart. Instead of receiving sympathy, Leonard is forced to face the person responsible for many of his childhood memories. His mother immediately confronts him about emotionally manipulating Penny. And what makes the scene even funnier is that she treats the entire situation like a psychological case study. For Leonard, this is a nightmare. For his mother, it is just another opportunity to study his behavior. And for Penny, it is basically the perfect revenge. Meanwhile, Sheldon and Amy are also discovering something important about their relationship. They are beginning to argue more often. At first, that seems like a bad thing. But then they realize that their arguments may actually be helping them think more clearly. Their scientific arguments become more intense, more personal, and somehow more productive. They begin fighting over equations, theories, and even each other's family members. But eventually, they realize that their arguments are not necessarily destroying their relationship. In fact, they may actually be making them better scientists. Because when Sheldon and Amy stop trying to be polite, their scientific work becomes more honest. And that is one of the funniest things about their relationship. They can insult each other for hours, but somehow, they still end up making scientific progress.